That, ladies and gents, is the sound of rock and roll. Jack here from Peach. Welcome to another video, guys. I'm joined by the awesome Steve from Marshall today.
Hello.
Thanks for swinging by, Steve. So, you're going to see what this is straight away from the camera. These are the pedals that I think I and a lot of other people have been wishing and longing for. It's basically like my Christmas list, pretty much. And Marshall have, completely out of the blue, I think it's fair to say, we haven't seen anything from them in a little while. They've just come out and they've given people exactly what they wanted. So, I'm sure some of you will have some complaints and some questions. You can drop those in the comments below, but I think we're going to try and just get rid of everything here, because this is exactly what people have asked for from Marshall for some time. So, maybe, Steve, you can just explain what these pedals are, what they were, and why now is the time to bring them back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, these are the original Marshall pedals. Back in the day, like in the 60s, we did do like a wah and a fuzz. But when people talk about Marshall...
Oh, right. I didn't even know.
Yeah, back in the very early days. But when people talk about the original Marshall pedals, they usually talk about the Guv'nor, which is that one there, yeah. So that came out originally in 1988. So if you do your maths, that's kind of a vintage pedal now, really.
Well, also, when you look at the prices of them, they are priced like vintage pedals as well, the originals.
Yeah, exactly. So the Guv'nor, the idea was to come up with a Marshall amp in a box. Now, that's kind of fairly common these days to get that style of pedal, but back then there was no one really doing it. There was lots of drive pedals on the market, obviously, but the guy who was sort of heading R&D at the time at Marshall, Steve Grindrod, he was given the task to capture the Marshall stack in a box, and then we had the Guv'nor.
Yeah, and it's fair to say as well that this is probably one of the most copied pedals to this day. You know, everyone's had their stab at it, not necessarily copying it to a T, but like you say, it was the first of its type, and now that term Marshall in a box is so oversaturated.
Yes.
Sorry for the pun. But, you just see them everywhere. Everyone kind of makes their own thing on it. So I just think it's awesome that you guys are actually bringing it back exactly as it was.
Yes.
And this was something you really emphasised to me, was that Marshall did not decide to sort of tweak them up or adapt them to modern day in any way. These are all exactly as the originals were.
Yeah, when we decided to sort of relaunch these, we got the actual original paper schematics from the archives at Marshall, and we copied them to a T. There's a couple of little things, people have got an original and they decide to open it up and compare it to this. There's a couple of little things like the pots and the jacks basically were no longer in manufacture, so we had to find alternatives, but the spec is exactly the same, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So there's nothing that's actually going to change the sound, and like I say, the actual schematic has been reproduced. It's a faithful recreation of the original Guv'nor. And the funny thing was, actually, we got some original Guv'nors from the Marshall Museum just to listen to them, and obviously because they're very, very old pedals, we found that they're all a little bit different anyway. Yeah,
because there's certain tolerances within the parts and the components and things.
Yeah.
Things drift over time.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. So that was the first one to do. Again, going back to what you just said, it's probably the most copied amp in a box pedal out there.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And it was also one of the best, because not many other pedals actually give you the full 3-band EQ.
Yeah.
Everything's usually on a tone pot, or maybe treble and bass, but to get the middle control on this pedal is so powerful and useful. I've played an original of these quite a bit, and it's exactly the same. The response is exactly the same. And also, I just want to kind of point out here that you could legitimately look at all of these pedals and say, well, aren't they all Marshall in a box type pedals? Which, of course, they are, but they all have different... They kind of adhere to different eras of Marshall.
Yes.
So,
definitely.
Obviously, we'll come on to the other pedals in a little bit, but the Guv'nor's kind of, it's of its time, when you said, like, late 80s when it came out, so it's kind of that JCM...
Yeah, exactly that.
Slightly hot-rodded thing.
And that's the reason why it looks a little bit different, by the way, like the chassis and the design's a little bit different, because that was actually released in 1988, was around for about 4 years on its own,
right?
So these other ones came out a little bit later.
Okay. All right, well, while we're on that,
Yeah.
let's just hear a few more. You're going to hear a bunch of different sound clips as well. I played a Gibson, and Steve's got this awesome Tom Anderson, so you can hear a little bit of a Gibson style and an S style guitar. Both of the clips are playing through the same usual rig of the Dr. Z Maz amp. And I want to just explore the controls a little bit, sort of go through the gain range, but I kind of set these where I felt, anyway, they sound their best. But I'm sure you will know different, you'll know better. So we're just going to kind of quickly sweep through some of the pots just so you can hear the range of the gain and the EQ. But this isn't going to be like finding every possible sound that the pedal has. So
Okay.
So we'll start with the dry tone. It is such a good sounding pedal. It's quite, in isolation like that, you might be listening to it thinking, it's a bit sort of, it's very mid-rangey. There's so much mid-rangey in it. Mid-range in it, I should say. And I really played with the mid control as well. Like you can really scoop it out and then really bring it back in. But I love so much that you guys have not tampered with the original, what made it so good. Because a lot of pedals these days are very polite. They sound great if you're playing on your own. But the whole point of this pedal, like you said, was to get that sound in a box, but also still to use it on a stage, in a mix with a band. And I think Gary Moore played probably the biggest proponent of this pedal.
He was the guy that kind of catapulted it really at the time. And I think the album artwork for Still Got the Blues as well actually had the Guv'nor on there, on the floor in the bedroom. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's a sound that you really have to kind of be on your game with the chops, don't you? Because it's so revealing. But that's exactly what a real Marshall amp does. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, like you've just said, some amps and pedals are really forgiving and sound great in isolation. But the point is, with most Marshall gear, it's that frequency that makes you really pop out when playing live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you may be listening to that in isolation, and it may actually surprise you that's what the pedal sounds like, because it just sounds like an amp.
Yeah.
To me, it's one of the most amp-like sounding pedals that ever existed, and so to have it reissued exactly as is.
Yeah, and going back to the actual feel of it as well, it's like the sensitivity of what you put in, as far as like your pickups or how hard you're hitting the guitar, kind of comes out of the pedal and the amp.
Yeah, definitely.
Considering how old the design is, it's amazing that way back then in the late 80s that we had a pedal that did that.
Simple as best a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And also, it's not just about the high gain thing. I turn the gain control back, and it's got a nice linear kind of progression to it as you bring it up.
Sure.
Same as all the EQ as well. So I'm going to stop waxing lyrical about the Guv'nor and how great that is. But I just want to kind of emphasise how good I think it is that they haven't tampered with it.
Yeah.
I'm really, really pleased with that. And it's worth pointing out, it's got the original loop jack on the back, which maybe just worth explaining quickly what that is and what it's for.
Yeah, a bit of a funny one that actually, because what it allows you to do is connect like a Y cable to it and have an effect inserted into the Guv'nor. So let's say, for argument's sake, it's a delay pedal, and let's say you're using the Guv'nor just for solos.
Yeah.
Every time you click on that Guv'nor, then it's also going to bring in that delay or whatever effects you've got in there. A lot of people didn't use it. Some people did. It's one of those things.
But it's there.
It's there if you want it.
I love that it's there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, that's I think that's the one that most people will be curious about. It's the same. It's the same as the original, and I'm really, really pleased about that. So, let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's move
so,
on.
Obviously, after the success of the Guv'nor, early 90s, they wanted to basically come out with some new pedals to follow on the success. But we ended up with 3 new pedals. The Bluesbreaker, which is obviously quite legendary in its own right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Drive Master, which was actually a revised version of the Guv'nor, which we'll go back to in a minute.
Okay.
And then the Shred Master, which was meant to be more for the high gain kind of players. And that explains why these look a little bit different to the original Guv'nor, because basically we stopped producing the Guv'nor in the early 90s to make way for these 3 new pedals.
Okay.
And these I say they were released originally in 92. They were trickling into the market, particularly into the hands of artists in the late 91. But the official release date was 92, yeah.
Okay. So if you've got one of these original pedals, chances are it's from 92.
Yeah.
Or thereabouts. Or, well, from any point after 92.
Yeah, they kind of went on till around 98. They started to fizzle out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And were any other pedals made in that box then? Was it just the Guv'nor?
Just the Guv'nor.
In that case. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as you alluded to, the Bluesbreaker, probably just after this one, is the one that I'm sure most of you are watching for. So, Mayer, bunch of other great guitar players have been noted to use original Bluesbreaker pedals, and just like this one, everyone's had their go at copying it or taking inspiration from the circuit anyway. Simple 3-knob controls, so gain, tone and level, and just plugged it in. I set it to where you see the controls there. It sounds exactly like I expected it to sound. I've never played an original, but having played a bunch of pedals that claim to be just like the original, but never quite, there's never quite that sound. That's it, straight away. So maybe if you're happy to have a play, I'll mess with the controls, because there's a lot in this. It's not just about that cranked Marshall thing like this one is a little bit more. So
this as well. This is actually the only one that's like soft clipping.
Right.
So again, the aim with this one was to be lower vintage kind of gain.
Okay, so here's the dry tone again. Such a good sounding pedal. Again, so I was playing with all the controls, but you always kind of end up back.
Yes.
They have a sweet spot, don't they?
They have a sweet spot.
Just like the amps,
100%, yes.
just like the amps do. Interestingly enough, and again, you pointed this out to me, that you'll notice the level is high.
Yeah.
But that's exactly how the original was. It didn't have that much output.
No, we did, like you mentioned earlier, we kind of contemplated making little tweaks.
Yeah.
Do we increase the output? Do we do this? But you know what? The originals had their quirks, and we just thought, you know what, let's just leave them as they are.
Keep them, yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds great everywhere I put the controls, but yeah, it's just, again, I love these little fastidious things that Marshall decided to do to just keep it, because that is obviously what made the pedal sound the way it did anyway. So if they had messed with anything, it wouldn't be the real deal.
No.
And I think it sounds great. So again, you'll have heard it with the humbuckers in the Gibson. You've heard it with the neck pickup on the Tom Anderson, and it's one of the most dynamic sounding pedals that there is, and it sounds exactly like a Marshall Bluesbreaker because it is.
Yeah.
I love it. So that's number 1 in the series. Is there a name for this particular series when it came out in the day, do you know?
No, they just literally just came out like as Marshall pedals.
The Marshall pedals, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think marketing back in those days was as full on as
Didn't matter, did it?
now.
People just went, okay, I bought a new Marshall pedal.
Yeah, there you go.
And I wish things were that simple now. So number 2 is Drive Master, and you said it's pretty much this.
Yeah, it is exactly that. It's an interesting one because obviously the Guv'nor gets all the publicity really, but the Drive Master was a revised version of the Guv'nor. So essentially, you're getting the same thing, but they decided to remove that insert.
Okay.
And that was only the real change. But again, another reason why they wanted to change it was because they wanted them all to match cosmetically as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just a revised Guv'nor. Essentially, the tone and the circuit and everything is the same. However, we've noticed little differences with this one, and I think it is down to the fact there's no insert loop in the circuit makes a slight kind of change.
Right. Okay.
But again,
hot rods it slightly because there's less in the circuit.
I mean, they're the same, but they're not. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, let's check it. I mean, I set this one up slightly differently earlier on to the Guv'nor just to differentiate them. So that's a little bit lower gain, a little bit more scooped as well. But again, I'll play with the controls.
Sure.
Which I will say the controls are in a much better place, I think, as well.
Yes.
On this than they are on this. Just a little easier to see.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we'll play around, and then I'll A/B them just so you can hear how close they actually are.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So I was actually switching partway through that. Switched a few times between the Drive Master and the Guv'nor.
Yeah.
You maybe felt a slight difference while I was doing it, but sounds pretty much the same.
I probably wouldn't have noticed if I didn't see you clicking, to be honest with you.
Right. So and maybe it's selling it short to say that it's just this pedal copied, but I think the cosmetic differences and the function differences alone, I think it owns its place.
Yeah, 100%.
So let us know in the comments as well which you prefer the look of, because being pretty much exactly the same sound, it is going to come down to the aesthetics. So I'm sure you can have a preference either way.
Yeah.
I mean, I dimed the gain there, but you'll have heard earlier on with the Guv'nor, there's a lot of range in it, and actually about halfway on that, where it was when you started, it sounds like a late 70s JMP
Yes. Yeah.
to a T.
Yeah.
to me.
Which is like the holy grail Marshall tone for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like that modded thing and the sort of edging into higher gain. And of course, you can slam a boost or an overdrive pedal into the front of these, and they respond brilliantly as well. But just straight in sounds great, kind of wherever you set it. So yeah, forgive us for sort of maybe selling this one a little short, but everything I talked about with the Guv'nor applies to that, apart from the loop. So last is the Shredmaster, and you kind of said this has maybe a little bit of an unfortunate name.
Yeah, don't think you have to shred to sort of get anything out of this pedal. I mean, I'm not a shredder, but I love the tone of this pedal.
Yeah.
It's the highest gain out of them all.
Okay.
But obviously you don't have to max out the gain anyway.
You don't have to. No. I have done. You don't have to.
Yeah. But the main difference that's worth mentioning is the mid control on this one compared to a Drive Master or a Guv'nor works very differently, and they've named it contour instead of mid. And actually when it's all the way down, which is kind of where it is now, you get the most amount of mids. As you turn it up, it starts to scoop out the mids.
Okay.
And also the treble response is very different on this one. So whereas the Guv'nor and Drive Master have got quite an open sort of top end sound to them, this one I'd say is a little bit more compressed, and those real high sort of shrill frequencies have been shaved off completely.
So it's a bit smoother.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me like this is your rhythm pedal and this is your lead pedal. I mean, that's a really basic way of kind of putting it across, but if you were to sit down and plug these in for the first time, that's probably where your instincts are going to take you. So so let's hear it. So here's a dry tone. Great as well. The contour is really powerful, so going from all the way to the left like you said, but it doesn't just bring in and out the mid-range, it seems like it moves the mid-range as well.
It's kind of like a sweep.
So all the way over to the right, like you said, it was very scooped, and then as you bring it in, it's like the mids come back in, but they gradually move down the frequency range, so all the way to the left is that nice fat thick kind of Andy Timmons kind of sound.
We can say that, can't we?
I think so. He's not copyrighted yet. So you can kind of EQ the whole pedal from that, really. But then you've got bass and treble as well.
And it's great to that contour control, depending which amp you're plugged into, you can really sort of still get your sound, if that makes sense. Whether you're plugged into a UK voiced amp versus an American one the next night, you can still kind of tweak it in.
You've hit on something there that I really want to put across with these pedals, because everyone says, okay, so if I buy a Fender amp and I buy a Marshall pedal, I've got a Marshall sound. It does not work like that.
No.
You really have to understand this. So it's all about the mid-range response. So not just that pedal having that contour control doesn't mean that that's the only one that will be able to facilitate that. They all have the perfect mid-range.
Yes.
Just from my experience of playing them today. And so that means you can... I don't mean that you can plug into any amp and get this sound, but the mid-range is in the right place for a Marshall.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of getting into the finer details of things, but that's what makes a pedal feel and sound like an amp.
Yes.
To me, is where the mid-range sits and where the compression sits, and every single one of those has it. You know, just as I was turning that contour control there on that pedal, as soon as I started to bring it round, I go, oh, there's those lovely Marshall mids. It's the bark, isn't it?
Yes, exactly that.
And they've all got it. So, do you have a favourite?
I did, but today it's changed.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of really enjoying the Shredmaster today.
Yeah.
Whereas kind of more... Well, obviously the Bluesbreaker is a bit of a different thing. I've always loved that for the lower game kind of thing. But yeah, I was always a Guv'nor kind of fan before, but I don't know, I'm feeling the Shredmaster today, so it's out of those two for me.
I think they know exactly what they're doing here. You're going to buy them all, aren't you? You're going to buy them all, at least those three together, because they look great together, they sound great together. Now, the size is one thing. Everyone's trying to make smaller and smaller pedals these days. Again, Marshall just said, no, we're making them like they originally were. But I like that commitment that you've got to make. You've got to sacrifice a little bit more space on your board.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it.
They weigh a little bit more too, but yeah, they're big, but they sound big, so...
Yeah, and they're made proper. These things are built properly. They're built to last.
I mean, don't try this, but I think if it got ran over, it might survive.
Yeah,
might.
Don't do that. But, yeah, there's the endorsement. So anyway, hopefully, guys, that kind of covers each of the pedals. I know I keep saying this over and over again. I think they sound exactly like they should do. But I'm sure you may disagree. So let us know in the comments what you think. If you want to find out any more information about any of these pedals, all the links will be down in the description below, so you can check them out on our website. I also don't know the pricing yet, but I'm guessing they're in the relatively affordable ballpark.
Yes.
They're not going to be stratospherically boutique kind of pricing. So again, check out the website for the finer details on that, lest I get into any trouble by giving you numbers. But I think that's about it. So thank you very much, Steve.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
For your great playing and your explanations. Thank you guys for watching. Check out the website for more information. Stay tuned, and we'll see you very soon. Cheers.